Syncing the mic, syncing the mic, syncing the mic. How's it going, everybody? Hope y'all are doing well. If you've never been here before, my name is Noah. I'm an independent musician. And in this series, which I'm calling the Beginner's Guide to Making Music, with this series, I really wanted to cater towards people who are just kind of getting started and don't have a mentor and don't really know where to start, who to trust, anything like that. Because I know with YouTube University, it can be kind of hard to tell who is actually credible. Like I've mentioned in previous videos, I am classically trained. I went to Belmont University here in Nashville for classical cello performance. So I do have experience on the performance side of music, but I was self-taught when it came to production and recording and all of that sort of stuff. And I'm not saying I'm an expert on anything, but I've gone through a lot of trial and error when it comes to making my own music. And I do work in music production here in Nashville. So I feel like I have some grounds to speak on it now. So with this new series, I really wanted to cater towards people who are just kind of getting started, and whether you see yourself only doing it as a hobby or you want to become a professional musician, I feel like anybody just getting started, or if you've been doing this for a while, anybody can really take some value out of these videos. I want to be very specific in each of these videos and really only hone in on one topic at a time so that it isn't super overwhelming. So jumping right into it, like you saw in the title of this video, this is going to be about DAWs, or DAWs, which stands for Digital Audio Workstation. Now, obviously, the very first thing you need to make music is a computer. I'm just going to assume you have that. But the next thing you're going to need is a DAW, because the DAW is the piece of software that essentially allows you to manipulate and record the music into the computer. You will need a hardware box called an audio interface to actually get your source into the computer, but I'm going to make that the next video and we can talk about that later. Sticking with the DAWs for now, I'm going to talk about 20 of them. 10 of them you don't really need to know about. I don't feel like they're very practical for beginners to use, but I'm going to put them in a lightning round at the end just so that you know about them. But I'm going to give you 10 options that I think are a little bit more practical for beginners and that could actually take you farther into your musical journey without you actually having to like switch around DAWs constantly. All right, starting off strong with the industry standard, which is going to be Pro Tools. Now, I have personal feelings about Pro Tools. It is, I guess, still technically considered the industry standard, and it is very powerful. You can do a lot with it. My main issue with Pro Tools at this point is it's owned by Avid, and it's kind of become very corporate in my opinion, and because it has become very corporate, it's extremely expensive. They really want to push you towards the subscription models, so buying a perpetual license for Pro Tools is just kind of astronomically expensive at this point for no reason. You cannot buy a perpetual license of Pro Tools through Avid's website. For some reason, you have to buy it through a reseller like Sweetwater. For the studio version, it is $5.99, and for the ultimate version, it is $14.99. And if you want to go the subscription route, it's $99 a year for the artist, $2.99 a year for the studio, and $5.99 a year for the ultimate. They do have Pro Tools Intro, which is free, but it only has 8 audio tracks, 8 instrument tracks, and 8 MIDI tracks. So it's pretty limited in what you can do, especially if you want to do like a full-fledged production. You also only get 4 simultaneous recording outputs, so if you wanted to record like a full band or even like a full drum set, like that's just not happening in the free version of Pro Tools. The plugins it comes with are very solid. Pro Tools has been around for a long time, so I would hope so. But like I said, it's very corporate and kind of bloated at this point, and I just wouldn't really recommend it for beginners. And I have a quick story about Pro Tools from when I was in college. The very first guy I ever recorded for when I was in college at Belmont, he used Pro Tools. And when I went to his studio, we sat down, you know, I got my cello out and everything, and he loaded up Pro Tools. And before I could record even one take, it crashed his computer, completely blue screened it. And that just kind of kept giving him issues the rest of the session. So that was not my greatest first impression of Pro Tools. But then my senior year, the very last project I ever did at Belmont, we were at Ocean Way actually, which is a very famous studio. Ocean Way, Nashville is a beautiful place. But we were there recording the Julius Klangel Quartet, which is the very first video I have on this channel. But we were supposed to start at roughly 4 4:30, 5:30 p.m., and Pro Tools decided to update right before the session got started. And when it updated, it just completely ruined their system. I think it took them like at least an hour and a half to get Pro Tools up and running on their computers finally. Like, it took them so long to get it up and running, we thought we were going to have to cancel and reschedule the entire recording session. All because Pro Tools just decided to update. So after that incident at Ocean Way, I was like, if Ocean Way, one of the most famous and well-renowned studios in the entire world, can't get Pro Tools to work, then I'm just not gonna bother with this stupid software. All right, now moving on to a not so shitty software, Logic Pro. Now Logic Pro was actually made by eMagic back in the day. It got bought by Apple and is continued to be developed by Apple. So because of that, it is exclusively for Mac. So if you're a Windows or a Linux user, you can't use Logic. Sorry. If you want to buy a perpetual license for it, which I would recommend, it is $199, or it is also included in the new like Apple Creator Bundle or Creator Studio, whatever it's called. It's $129 for the year or $12.99 a month. Personally, I'm not a big fan of subscriptions. If you decide you want to go with Logic, I would just buy the perpetual license. Now you can get a 30-day free trial when you sign up for Apple Creator Studio, or if you buy a new Mac or iPad, I think it gives you a 90-day free trial. I have personally used Logic a little bit. It's definitely not a bad software. It is very good with virtual instruments. If you are just getting started, and like I said, this series is for beginners mainly. If you are just getting started, it has very good virtual instruments in my opinion. They aren't the best sounding thing in the world. If you go with a third-party plugin company like Spitfire or anything like that, those instruments are just gonna sound better. But if you're just getting started, they are very, very serviceable. I would not feel bad about using Logic's stock plugins. I would say if you are a very Mac heavy user, if you have an iPhone, iPad, Mac, all of that, then I would say Logic is probably what I would recommend. And I'll talk about GarageBand really quick just because we're on the subject of Apple. GarageBand is essentially Logic Lite. It is the free version of Logic, pretty much. It does have a track limit. I think it's 255 tracks, which is like way more than you would probably ever need. And it doesn't have a lot of very advanced functionality or a lot of like really good instruments or plugins. But if you are just starting out and you want to see what Logic would feel like to use, I would just recommend you use GarageBand. And if you like GarageBand, just pay for Logic. If you're an Apple user, I would just get Logic. You can definitely try out some of the other DAWs I'm going to talk about that are supported with Mac, but especially if you're a beginner, I think Logic is so fully featured and usable when it comes to the UI. It has a very good UI that personally I would just recommend you stick with Logic if you're a Mac user. All right, moving on to number 3, which is going to be Cubase. So the price for Cubase, if you're looking at the bottom tier, the Elements, that is going to be $99.99. For the Artist, you are looking at $329, and for the Pro version, it is going to be $579.99. Cubase does offer a 60-day free trial if you wanted to try it out for the Pro and the Elements version, which is fully functional. Now, Cubase I would consider a very mature DAW. It's been around for a long time. It's made by Steinberg, who also makes a lot of plugins, so all their built-in software is going to be very, very solid. A lot of composers famously use Cubase. I know like Hans Zimmer uses it, but in my opinion, because it is so mature, it's a little bit complicated to use, at least when it comes to the UI. It's really great for scoring and composing, but you kind of have to know what you're doing. And it's also a little expensive for the versions that you would actually want to buy, the Artist and the Pro. The Elements is probably okay if you're just getting started, but it is limited. 48 audio tracks, 64 MIDI tracks, 24 instruments, 16 group, and 8 send and returns. So that's probably plenty if you're just getting started, but I would just honestly get the Artist or the Pro, which, like I said, is a little expensive. I definitely would recommend Cubase, but probably only down the line once you have some experience under your belt. All right, moving on to number 4, that is going to be Fender Studio Pro, formerly known as PreSonus Studio One, RIP. Studio Pro is kind of interesting. It is definitely a good DAW. I remember I used it when it was still Studio One, but because Fender now bought PreSonus, it's kind of become a little bit corporate in my opinion. It's also $199 for a perpetual license, or $19.99 a month if you want to do their subscription version. Or I know if you buy a PreSonus audio interface, one of their new ones, it will come with Studio Pro as a download for you. There is no free trial from what I could find. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's a way to get a free trial, but from what I could find, there was nothing, which is a little frustrating because the plugins and the virtual instruments actually aren't that bad. I personally really like the UI. It's very blue, so just know that. But like I said, the plugins are solid. I think the UI is pretty easy to use. You can download it for Windows, Mac, and Linux. It's still definitely a solid option, but because it got bought out by Fender, I just don't know realistically how long into the future it's going to be supported now. And personally, I just think there are cheaper and more fully featured options for the money. So yeah, Studio Pro, Studio One is fine. If you buy a PreSonus audio interface, then might as well use it. You know, it comes with it for free. But personally, I don't know if I would actively recommend it for somebody just getting started out, given, in my opinion, there are better options. All right, and number 5, we're going to look at Ableton Live. Price for the intro, you're looking at $99. For the standard is going to be $349, and for the suite is going to be $749. So also kind of expensive. And for the free functionality, it does offer a 30-day free trial of the suite, which is fully featured. Ableton is a really good DAW, in my opinion. It's kind of the same as Cubase, but for electronic artists. It's a little bit complicated when it comes to the UI, but it is very, very powerful. The UI isn't terrible. It's a little bit dated and complicated looking, in my opinion, especially for beginners, but it is very good for automation, and it just gives you lots of control over plugins and how they sound. It also has good built-in sequencers and stem separation if you're doing electronic or rap music. The built-in plugins are really, really powerful. I would feel comfortable using them for pretty much anything. The one thing I did notice when I was looking at Ableton's website is the full version, if you get all the plugins, is over 70 gigabytes. Which may not sound like a lot if you have a lot of storage, but if you were starting out on a laptop like I was that only had like a 256 gig SSD, and you know, a third of that's taken up with Windows and another third is taken up with, you know, your personal files and whatever other software you have on the computer. 70 gigabytes for just the DAW alone is kind of a lot, especially when you're going to be like tracking into it and that size is going to be getting bigger. Like, just know if you're going to use Ableton or any of these DAWs with a lot of built-in plugins, you're probably going to have a decent amount of storage. So yeah, just like Cubase, Ableton's a great option, but I would really only recommend it for more experienced users. And also it really caters towards the electronic and kind of like hip hop rap genres more so than actually tracking audio into it. All right, now moving on to number 6, which is going to be FL Studio. FL Studio is really similar to Ableton. It kind of caters more towards the electronic rap and hip hop genres. It has really good built-in sequencers, loopers, stem separation, sampling tools, a lot of really good built-in plugins, libraries, instruments, effects, all of that sort of stuff. It's a very powerful software. I do like that FL Studio's free version is fully functional. The only caveat with it is you cannot open saved projects. So either you finish the project right here and now, or you just can't open it again. For the pricing, for the fruity version, it is $99. For the producer, it is $179. For the signature is $269. And for the all plugins version, you are looking at $449. So a little bit cheaper than Ableton, but if you want the full version with all the plugins and everything, it's still a little expensive in my opinion. I would say if you are a electronic hip hop or rap artist, you could definitely use FL to get started. It has a pretty good UI in my opinion, and it also has a lot of built-in tools that kind of teach you or help you at least construct songs. And if you're just getting started out and you don't know how to actually start a song or construct a song from start to finish, having tools like that built into the DAW itself could be pretty beneficial. There's also a lot of support and tutorials for FL Studio. If you have pretty much any question, you can find somewhere on the internet that will answer it. All right, moving on to number 7, which is going to be Bitwig. So pricing for Bitwig for the essentials, it is $99. When I looked at it the other day, it was $75. For the producer version, it is $199. It was on sale for $149, and the studio version is $399. I found it on sale for $299. I'm not sure if those are like basically perpetual sales or not, but those are the sales I saw it for. It does give you a 30-day fully functional free trial. Bitwig is probably the best like niche DAW. It has a lot of good plugins and sounds, instruments, effects, all of that, but it is the UI isn't bad, but it's a little bit complicated in my opinion. Once again, not a DAW I would actively recommend for a beginner. It's kind of niche what Bitwig is for. It's won a couple awards and everything, so it's definitely not a bad software. I just think like the others, it's more for advanced users who specifically want to use Bitwig for a specific reason. I would not recommend Bitwig for the beginner just trying to learn how to use a DAW. All right, number 8, GarageBand, we already talked about, so we're gonna go to number 9, which is Reason. And the price for Reason, we are looking at $2.99. It does give you a 7-day fully functional free trial, but you have to put in your credit card info, which I'm not the biggest fan of, and if you don't cancel it in time, they will charge you. I personally don't have a ton of experience with Reason, so from what I've seen, Reason's big thing is having like software versions of rack mount gear. The rack plugin window they have is kind of the main selling point of Reason. Just like Ableton and FL, it's kind of more of a beat making tool. And just like Bitwig, it's kind of a more niche software, especially with that whole rack window. I want to say Tyler, the Creator, famously made a couple tracks in Reason. So I'm sure it's functional. I'm sure you can make pretty much whatever you want with it if you know how, but it's not that great for beginners. Once again, it's kind of a niche software. If you're just getting started out, Reason does not function like any other DAW, so I just would not start out with that. All right, and moving on to number 10, and this is the DAW I would probably recommend for anybody just getting started out in 2026. This is going to be my main recommendation for this video, and this is my DAW of choice if you ever catch any of my live streams, and that is Reaper. Reaper is really cool in my opinion because it's a open source project run by a really small team. It's only $60 for a perpetual license, or if you can put up with the 5-second nag screen when you initially open the software, you can use it indefinitely for free. Free functionality, like I said, it is fully functional for free basically forever if you could put up with that nag screen. The thing with Reaper, I will say, is it is very bare bones. It does come with its re-plugin suite, which are also pretty bare bones. It doesn't have the best UI in the world, but the cool thing about Reaper is it's very customizable. You can basically download any skin you want for it, and you can make it look like Pro Tools, Logic, pretty much whatever you want, you can make Reaper look like it. The plugin suite it comes with is very functional. It's probably not the easiest thing to use, but some people complain that Reaper is kind of hard to learn when you're first getting started. In my opinion, that was not the case at all. I think because it is so bare bones, it is actually very easy to learn. Also, it's got a very supportive community. If there's any questions you have, you can find a tutorial on it, I promise you. Also, you can route all the audio into OBS, which I think is really cool. That's how I use it for my streams. I use Restream to take the audio from Reaper into OBS, and then I can record and stream from there. The only caveat with Reaper, and I will be totally transparent, is, in my opinion, and maybe it's a skill issue, that could definitely be the case. In my opinion, the MIDI editor in Reaper is not the best, just because Reaper isn't like tailored to beat making and looping like Ableton or FL is. So if that's your genre of choice, I would still definitely try Reaper and give it a shot, but just be aware their MIDI editor, it's very functional, but it's not like the most intuitive and easiest thing to use in my opinion. So if you're going to be using a lot of MIDI, I would probably lean more towards FL or Ableton if they're in your budget, but just try Reaper. Like I said, it's free, why not? It's also just extremely powerful, even though the UI isn't the prettiest thing in the world. If you're an advanced user, if you're doing professional mixing, mastering, all of that stuff, it has a lot of very powerful features for those more power users. But like I said, because it is so bare bones from the start, you can make it as complicated or as simple to use as you want. All right, so now we are going to do the lightning round. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I wouldn't actively recommend any of these DAWs just because they are very niche in my opinion, but almost all of these are free and pretty fully featured. But if you have some like very hyper specific need or some very hyper specific like configuration or setup, maybe one of these would work for you. Personally, I would not recommend them if you're just starting out, but I feel like you should be aware of them. All right, number 1, Cakewalk. It was actually the very first DAW I ever tried out. It's been bought out by BandLab. It's kind of an old DAW. They've tried to resurrect it with these 2 different versions. I think they're called Sonar and Next. Next, from what I can tell, is very beginner oriented. It's a little bit more simple of a UI. It's also supported on Windows and Mac. Sonar is the more fully featured version. It's more like a Pro Tools or a Reaper, but it is Windows only, so no Mac, no Linux. I haven't used it in a long time because Reaper is so good, but you know, watch a tutorial on it. If it piques your interest, use it. Why not? I'm pretty sure it's free. The main thing with all of these is you just realistically won't use them for very long. Maybe you'll start learning on one of these, but no like actual professional, and maybe you don't want to be a professional, but nobody like actually serious about music, in my opinion, really uses these for actual production. Gee, how to speed run getting a bunch of dislikes on your video. Number 2, Samplitude. Once again, Windows only, so that may be a deal breaker. It's an okay interface. I wouldn't really recommend it for beginners. Number 3, Traction Waveform. You could consider it because it is a completely free and fully featured option. The paid options are surprisingly expensive. I think for the full version with all the plugins, it's $1,000. In my opinion, Waveform just doesn't really stand out in any way. It isn't like the sleekest UI. It's just fine. It's, you know, if you want to just get started, it doesn't really stand out in a way. You probably just won't use it for very long. Number 4, Ardour, which is a free open source DAW. It's mainly for Linux, in my opinion. You can download it on Mac and Windows, but if you want the precompiled binary, so if you want to download it just like a normal application, you have to pay for that. You can manually configure the binaries yourself if you know how to do that, but I'm guessing if you're a beginner, you probably don't know how to do that. Also, Ardour's UI is very like old looking, in my opinion. Yeah, you know, it's fine, it's free, there aren't any limits on it, but it's kind of like a high technical barrier to entry for Ardour, so wouldn't recommend for a beginner. All right, sorry if I look different. I had to switch to OBS again because I ran out of space on my SD card. But moving on to number 5, which is going to be UAD Luna. This is made by Universal Audio, who makes a bunch of really nice audio interfaces. The Apollo series is very, very famous. They also have their lower end series called the Volt series, and supposedly Luna syncs up with the Apollo interfaces or any UAD interface, and somehow they like talk to each other and do cool stuff. I don't really know exactly how it works. I will say Luna has a very pretty interface. If you are just getting started out, it's pretty easy to use from what I can tell. My main issue with it is they market it as kind of like this AI assistant DAW. You can like talk to it and supposedly it'll like auto sense what you're trying to record and it'll like manually adjust like gain and stuff. I don't know exactly. I don't really like the AI-ness of it. And the main concern I would have if you're just starting out is if you use a DAW like that, you're going to get reliant on using the AI assistant constantly and you'll never actually learn how to properly produce. It is free and fully functional except for hardware inserts. But if you get the paid version, you do get a bunch of Universal's very nice plugins. They make a lot of really good plugins. So I would say pretty good for a beginner if you just want to try it out. But I would be wary about using all of the AI features because if you, like I said, if you become reliant on them, then you'll never be able to use any of the actual like professional DAWs that I talked about before. All right, number 6, we are looking at LMMS, which stands for Linux Multimedia Studio. Once again, free and open source, which is cool. However, the interface just kind of sucks. The UI is not good. It's basically trying to be like a free version of FL Studio. It's kind of a beat making and looping tool, but because it is strictly a beat making and looping tool, you cannot record audio into it. The tutorial I watched about LMMS was like, just record in like Audacity and then bounce it out to LMMS. Fuck that noise. I'm not doing all that shit. Just not functional and not very user-friendly for a beginner at all. Would not recommend LMMS. And then number 7, like I just mentioned, Audacity. Audacity is just like Ardour and LMMS. You can record audio into it, but it's just old. The interface looks old, like it's usable. It's not hard to use. It just looks kind of crap. It is meant for like bare bones beginners, but it just also isn't very functional. The UI just looks old and you just realistically, unless you need it for just recording a single vocal track or a like podcast or something, there's really no point in using Audacity. Supposedly they're coming out with a new version that's like fully revamped with a new UI and everything, but from what I can tell off their website, that is not out yet. In fact, I think it's kind of behind schedule. So yeah, unless you're using it for like the simplest projects in the world, I wouldn't bother with Audacity. And number 8 is going to be BandLab. BandLab, like I mentioned before, owns Cakewalk now. The big selling point of BandLab is it's a browser-based DAW, so you can share the session with your friends. So if y'all aren't able to physically be together, at least you can look at the same project file. However, besides that, it's really not good for anything else. You can't really produce in it. All the built-in like instruments and sounds and everything, they're just not that good. Unless you're trying to make like baby's first song, I would not bother with BandLab. It's just not really a practical tool at all. And then number 10, I am going to merge Acid Pro and Akai MP Beats together because they're essentially the same thing. They're basically like a worse, less supported version of FL Studio and Ableton. They're just really bare bones beat making in loop software. Like I've said with the whole lightning round, just not very good. You're not going to use it for a long time. I wouldn't really even bother. But I think that's going to do it for me. That was all the DAWs I wanted to talk about. That wasn't every single DAW out there. I know there are some other ones like Digital Performer. There's a couple other browser-based DAWs that I've recently learned about that you could consider. I might throw those down in the description if you wanted to take a look. So I know that was a lot, but in conclusion, if you're just getting started, whether you're on Windows, Mac, or Linux, personally, I would try out Reaper. It might not be for everybody, but it is free and is fully featured. There are no limits to it. So personally, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't at least try it. It's really powerful, but also really simple to learn in my opinion. Like I mentioned, it's super customizable and you can upload pretty much any plugin you want to Reaper. In fact, I want to say you can actually code your own plugins in Reaper itself without like a separate software, which if you know how to do that is really cool. I personally don't, but if you know how to do it, that's a really cool feature. If you're a Mac user, I would definitely consider GarageBand/Logic. Both of those, in my opinion, for beginners are probably the best options out there right now. All of the other options, Reason, Bitwig, Ableton, FL, all of that is going to be a little bit more in the advanced user categories, in my opinion. Everything else is going to have some barrier to entry, whether that's price or just usability. But once you get your chops up, once you've learned how to produce, Cubase, Ableton, FL are all very industry standard. Even Pro Tools, if you want to go with Pro Tools. I know a lot of guys who personally still use it, so I'm not going to completely poo-poo Pro Tools, but I just haven't had very good personal experiences with it. And then everything I mentioned in the lightning round just isn't really practically usable, in my opinion, for the long term, especially when it comes to support and functionality. And if you have any like questions about any of those DAWs, like it's going to be kind of hard to find solutions if you have a very specific problem with them. At least with Reaper and Logic, if you have a problem, there will be a tutorial on how to solve it. So yeah, that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you spending some of your time with me today. I will leave all my links down in the description below if you want to check out my website. I do have a buy me a coffee if you want to donate to my charity, which is my bank account. If you want to see more of me, I have all my socials down there as well. All my personal music is available on my website to download for free in its high-res formats, or you can pay whatever you want for it if you want to support me. The next episode in the series is going to be about audio interfaces, so keep a lookout for that in the next couple of weeks. But thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.